So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, guys, based on the time zones you all are coming from. So guys, before we start with the session, can you all please give me a quick confirmation if you all can see my screen and hear me loud and clear as well? Perfect. Thank you so much for the confirmation, everyone. So my name is Neeraj Keria, and I've been working in this IT industry for more than 13 years now. Now, let's get started. So the main agenda for today's session, we are going to discuss on the concepts of RPA, what exactly RPA is and how it is useful. Then we are going to see the introduction to RPA on as a part of RPA Studio, as a UiPath Studio. And then we are going to look at how to install UiPath, what are available different projects in UiPath, and what are the components inside UiPath as well. This is the agenda that we are going to focus on for today's session. So basically, first of all, let's understand what exactly is robotic process automation. Let's say we consider an instance where we want to publish our articles on various groups, on various social media groups at a specific time every day. Now, this is a task that we have to perform manually. The question here arises, would you wish to do it manually yourself, or would you appoint an employee whose sole job would be to publish articles every day? If we appoint any particular employee for just for the sake of publishing articles, then that is going to be expensive affair for us, correct? And this is going to be a completely not that much interesting job for that employee. So instead of hiring the employee, we can let a robot do this task for us. And we can simply configure a computer software or a robot to interpret human actions, and then we can imitate between them. And then we can allow them to imitate. And that's why we can just configure a robot to publish an article every day at the mentioned time. And that would not only cost us less, but that will also be less tiresome for us and for others as well. And that's why the mimicking action, that's why we can summarize as mimicking human actions to perform a sequence of steps that leads to a meaningful activity without any human intervention is known as robotic process automation. And that's why here we have three core components: robotic, process, and automation. Robotic focuses on mimicking the human action that is done by robots. Then we have process, because the actions, they need to be executed in a given sequence. Let's say we are trying to open up a website. So before we can open the website, we have to open the browser first. Then we have to click on the search bar, and then only we can start typing in the address, or we can see the website that we are trying to open up. So there's a sequence that we have to follow. That means without opening the browser, if we start typing the website address, will it work? It won't, correct? So we have to make sure we follow that sequence so that we can complete the given task with utmost accuracy. And that's why the sequence has to be maintained. And then automation. So we have to make sure that there is no human intervention required. Each and every component here is executed automatically. All right. So that exactly is what we mean by robotic process automation. And RPA is basically completely different even from the bad jobs that we can achieve from Java and Jenkins, because again, they are something achieved on the servers, right? Let's say if we want to perform the automation within programs, let's say using Jenkins, when we define the pipeline, we are automating the configuration changes. If we want the application to perform a given task, either by CLA or by GUI, we cannot do that by using Jenkins and other bad jobs. That's a completely different scenario, correct? So Jenkins are mostly used as a complete pipeline for making the changes and for pulling all the entire code from different sources. But RPA is something that we use for completing a given task within an application itself. We don't use it for changing the configuration, but we use it mostly for the configuration changes here. And that exactly is what robotic process automation is. It will help us in making sure that we are able to perform a sequence of steps that leads to a meaningful activity without any kind of human intervention. That is what is referred as robotic process automation. All right, so now there are multiple tools. There are multiple tools available in the market. Like we have the tools like we have UiPath, we have WorkFusion, Redwood, Automation Anywhere, AntWorks, on BluePrism, Kofax. There are multiple tools available out there in the market. But the main market is captured only by three main tools. That is Automation Anywhere, UiPath, and BluePrism, where UiPath has been the leader in the RPA market. So there are multiple advantages of UiPath and all the other tools as well that we are going to focus on. All right, so these are the three main players in RPA market. We have Automation Anywhere, UiPath, and then we have BluePrism. So if you talk about the entire market segmentation, like we have UiPath, we have Automation Anywhere, BluePrism. So these are basically the global leaders in the market. Where the biggest player is UiPath, then followed by Automation Anywhere. Then we have BluePrism, then we have Edgeware, then we have Nice, WorkFusion, SoftMotive, Kofax, IntelliBot. So these all are different players in the market, where UiPath has been the global leader. Now, UiPath has multiple use cases. Why it is popular? First of all, it has a really intuitive GUI method, as in graphical user interface, which we can use for getting started. And if you talk about the entire, like we can say the main differences between these three main platforms, then UiPath is basically UiPath offers a community edition, that is a free edition that we can use for our testing purpose. Whereas in BluePrism, there is no trial available for BluePrism, and Automation Anywhere offers us a trial that we can use for 30 days. Whereas in terms of the platform being user friendly, it is highly user friendly, UiPath, whereas Blueprints also offers a complete visual designer, and Automation Anywhere is more focused on scripting. That's why it is familiar and it is easier for developers. Whereas in terms of popularity, we had discussed UiPath is the most popular RPA tool out there, then followed by Automation Anywhere, then followed by BluePrism, because again it has less amount of coding required as compared to Automation Anywhere. And UiPath ranks #1 fastest growing company in North America on Deloitte's 2019 Technology Fast 500. It has been because automation has, again, nowadays it is applying to almost every vertical that we can think of. They all are using the components of UiPath. Like we have Airbus, NASA, Autodesk, Fujifilm, HP, DHL. They all have been running on top of UiPath itself, because there are multiple advantages of UiPath that we get when we start working on UiPath. Basically, we can run multiple processes and we can automate them at once. It offers a cost-cutting technology and enhances the resource optimization. We don't require any kind of programming knowledge. It supports and allows regular compliance process, and it is much easier to model, scale, and deploy the automation process. And it makes it easy to track the effects. And there's no, and again, it offers no complexities in terms of continuous build and release management as a part of the most popular RPA tool. So let's discuss on the entire component of how to install UiPath. So UiPath, as we know, has two different versions. We have the enterprise, and then we have the community version also available. So UiPath is definitely one of the easiest tools to install. And before we install UiPath on a system, we have to make sure that we have at least 8 GB of RAM. We have Windows 7 or higher version of Windows, and once we have met this requirement, we can choose the edition which we want to install. So basically, UiPath has multiple editions such as Community Cloud, Studio, Enterprise Cloud, and Enterprise Server. And all of these editions are different in respect to their functionalities and features. Where we can see the versions available for, if you want to use the Community Cloud, we can use it as a free tool. Then we can use the enterprise use for, we can use a studio where we get 60 days of free trial for all, for studio, enterprise cloud, and also for enterprise server. And basically, there are multiple differences in these different versions. That means how many robots are allowed in these different versions, how many parallel process that we can execute, how, if we want, we can, how many number of robots as in how many concurrent operations, and how much of tasks we can automate by, because at the end, the execution of the entire process is going to be done by using the robots. So here we can see how many robots we can create at one time. So that is one of the main differences between the enterprise and the free version available. And then once we install UiPath, once we have configured it, then this is the UiPath dashboard, UiPath Studio dashboard that we are going to look at. So basically there we have to enter the details, where we have to enter our details by including our work email, and then we will be able to receive the confirmation email regarding the download link as well directly on the email. And once we install it, we will be able to see the UiPath dashboard being opened up. So here we are going to start with the entire process creation, and then we are going to see how the entire dashboard is structured, what all are different components involved, and how we can get started. So in terms of installation of UiPath, we had discussed, we need to have the entire Windows-based system. We need to have at least 8 GB of RAM. Our system should be running Windows 7 or higher. And then we have to make sure that we also have a plugin, or we can say extension, installed in the browsers. If we are looking to scrap data from different websites, then we do need to have the plugin already configured and installed for the browsers. That is for Chrome, for Mozilla Firefox, for Edge. So these all plugins and extensions should be enabled in the browser itself if we want to perform any kind of data scrapping up from the web pages. And then we had seen that first of all, we have to go to the official website. We have to fill in our details. We have to open up our email, where we will be receiving the download link that we can use for getting started on the installation for UiPath. Now then we have to wait for setup to initialize, and then we can enter the email address so that we can use the same email address even for the cloud version. So there are multiple projects that we can complete in UiPath. For example, now there are multiple project templates as well. Like we can use any of the previous template. For example, if we now currently we start with the process. Basically, process is simply starting from scratch, where we can assign our own process and logic, and then we can get started. Then we have library section, where we can save some kind of reusable components as a part of the library. And then we have orchestration process, where we can implement a process through service orchestration and human intervention, where we can use a template for background process. If you want some kind of process to be up and running in the background, we want to design the entire enterprise framework. We want to achieve a trigger-based attention, or we can say attended automation, or we want looking to work on many transactional-based process as a part of the discussion in terms of template creation. So basically, process is useful when we want to start a blank project to design a new automation process. Library is something like we have jQuery, where if we have designed a component, we can save it as a reusable component in library that we can use in any given project. We can do that. And orchestration is, let's say, when we have the requirement of deployment of multiple resources with a given configuration, then that is something that we call as orchestration. Or where we want to manage something on a complete cluster, then that is called as orchestration. All right. So then we have background process, where we can use it to create a process which did not require the user interaction. There can be multiple background process running. And then we are going to work on the robotic enterprise framework, which is basically used for deployment of large scale requirements. And then we have trigger-based attendant automation. That means where we want to respond to events, and that too in an automated way. And then at last we have transactional process, where we use it for modeling the automation workflow as a flow chart, as a flow chart here. All right, so now next we have multiple UiPath Studio components that we are going to look at. Now, this is the entire dashboard for UiPath that we are going to look at. So if we have already installed UiPath, then we can start by creating a new process. So here we can create process. Here we can define the name of the process. Let's say we name it as Edureka. So this is going to create a new process for us that we can use. So here we can define the entire flowchart, the entire sequence that we are looking to execute. This is the entire dashboard for UiPath that we are going to look at. So we have a top ribbon section on top. And in the right section, we can see the entire section for the different activities. For example, let's say if we want to define it as a sequence, we are looking to define the entire flowchart, or let's say if we are going to add any kind of event such as open browser. So all the activities are going to be available with us. So we can drag and drop any of the activities in the sequence, and then we can get started. And for each and every variable, and if the properties of the element selected, so basically in any of the properties that we select, so for example, if we are using open browser, so the properties for that particular activity will be available in the properties tab in the right sidebar. So let's start by defining a complete sequence here. So we can start by now here we can start by defining a flowchart as well, or we can start by defining a sequence itself that we can use for getting started. So now we can start by defining a complete flowchart, or we can start by defining a sequence itself. So let's say now when we start by defining a flowchart, here when we click on flowchart, let's say this is flowchart is for a certain use case. Then we can define multiple sequences in a given flowchart as well. For example, here we can define multiple sequences, and then we can define logic. So that means whenever this entire process is started based on logic, then this is going to choose which sequence it has to follow. For example, if we are going for multiple conditional based scenarios, then we can use the flowchart. Or if you're looking to start just one sequence, then we can start by defining only a single sequence as well for getting started. And then we can start adding any particular project in that particular sequence that we want to go for. So let's do one thing. Let's start by a simple project in RPA. For example, let's say here we are trying to scrap the content available on any e-commerce stores. Then we can do that easily by using the data scrapping module available in RPA. So let's say we are going to scrap the data available on the e-commerce page, and then we are going to save that particular variable in the browser as well as a part of data scrapping, right? So what we can do is, first of all, we are going to scrap data from a website and store it in a CSV file automatically by using the entire strategy for RPA here. So let's do one thing. Let's start by defining the entire sequence. So here we'll be using the data scrapping tool, and then we are going to record the data that we want to extract. Then we are going to extract the correlated values accordingly, and then we are going to write the data that we have extracted in a given CSV file as a part of the output of this entire program. So first of all, we have to choose a website from where we want to scrap the data here. So let's open up a website. So let's open up an e-commerce store. Let's say we have one example as any sample e-commerce website. Let's say we have this sample store available for Boofubu, where we have the section for, let's say we have backpacks available. Where say we have backpacks, we have watches, we have jewelry, we have multiple backpacks available here. Let's say we have any e-commerce stores. As an example, let's say we have any e-commerce store here. Now we want that we should be able to scrap the content available on this e-commerce store. That means we are looking to create a separate Excel file which will contain the product name for each and every item listed here, along with their original pricing and along with their new pricing as well. So either we can perform the given task manually one by one, and suppose if there are hundreds of items, then we have to do this task manually, or we can automate the entire process by using the RPA technique. So we can automate the entire task accordingly. So let's see how we can automate this task. Now we have the URL. So now we are going to automate the process of data scrapping from the given domain. So first of all, we have to come back to our RPA tool, and then we can see we have a data scrapping field available on the top section. We have data scrapping. So screen scraping is basically useful when we are trying to scrap anything from any specific images. So let's start by defining the sequence here. Before we can use data scraping, we have to make sure that we have the extension for UiPath enabled in the browser. So in case we don't have the extension enabled, then we can search for the extension as well, UiPath extension for Chrome. So whichever browser we are going to use, we have to make sure we have the extension already installed and enabled for that browser we are going to refer to. We have to make sure we are able to download this entire plugin, and then we have to integrate this plugin with the Chrome like we have done just now. So we can see we have the extension already enabled for Chrome. And because if we start data scraping, then we have to make sure that the UiPath web automation is enabled. For example, if we are trying to use Safari, Chrome, or Internet Explorer, we have to make sure these different extensions are enabled. Right. So once we have enabled this extension, then we can use it for getting started right away. All right. So for data scraping here, we have to come back and then we can start by defining the data scraping tool here. So we have to click on it. Now here we have to make sure we are able to select the element first. Let's say here we can click on next, and we can see now we will be getting a complete scanner through which we will be able to scan the element here. Let's say we want to scan and store the data available in this element. We can select this one. And now we have to define a pattern. That means now we have to define a pattern so that RPA tool can look for the same pattern data set, and it will try to capture all the data which is related. So if we click on next, then we can define this one. So as you can see here, each and every heading has automatically been selected by RPA by defining the pattern that we have done on the given web page. And then we can define the text column name. So let's say if you want to name this as product name, we can save the entire details as product name column. And if you want to extract the URL, that means obviously these are going to have the product description URL. So if you want to save the URL as well, then we can save this as, let's suppose, product URL. So you can save this as product name, and then you can save it as product URL. And now we can click on next. So as you can see here, it has automatically scrapped the entire data. That means we are having the product name for each and every listing available on this page, along with the entire URL which has been associated with each and every listing here, as you can see here. So let's just say if you want to collect more data, we want to scrap more data, then here we can click on extract core related data. If we are done, then we can click on finish. Or if we want to extract more data, then we can click on extract core related data. Let's say here we want to extract the previous pricing for each and every item here. So here we can click on the first item, and then we have to establish the pattern. Okay, we have defined a different pattern here. So as you can see now, we can see the entire data being the entire data set which are correlated that we are going to extract here one by one, correct? So all the data set with the previous pricing has been selected. So now we can get started on adding. Now, if you want to save the price, the original pricing as well, we can do that. So as you can see, all the data set for previous pricing has been selected. Now we can give it a name. Let's say we name it as original price. And we can, if you want to save the URL, now we don't want to save the URL for this one, so we can click on next. Now we have the name, the URL, and the original price. Now we also need to store the current price as well. So we can click on extract correlated data, the first data, the second data, and now we can save it as final price. Click on next. So now we have the name, URL, original price, and final price for each and every item here that we have selected. So for example, let's say just to validate, we have rain cover having the original price defined as $999, and now we are getting this for $299. That means now we are able to get the entire data set which has been scrapped from the given web page. And once we are done, we can click on finish. And now if the data is available across multiple pages, as you can see, if we scroll down, we have data available in multiple pages, correct? So if we want that, then we can click on yes, and then we can define how this is going to come to the next page as well. So now you can see the entire data scrapping module has automatically been configured as a part of the entire data set here. Now, once we have scrapped the data, we also need to store this data in a Excel file. Now we need to store this file, whatever data is being scrapped here, we need to store it in a CSV file so that we can use it as a reference. So what we can do, we can write a CSV file out of it. So in the same activity tab, we can search for write CSV. As you can see, we have an activity predefined called as write CSV. So we can open it up. We can drag it in the same extract structure data DIB component here. As you can see, here we have simply derived the entire write CSV component. Now here we have to define the path. That means in which file we are going to write the data which is going to be scrapped by this entire scrap module that we have created. So we can use any of the sample file that we may have created. All right, so now once we have scrap data, now we can define the CSV file in which we are going to write the data. So let's do one thing. Let's create a sample CSV file. So we can save this file as a new CSV file. Let's say we save it as web scrapping. Let's save it in the browser, in the desktop itself, by the name of web scrapping. We can save it. So this Excel, no, not in Excel file here. Let's save it as CSV. Let's do one thing. Let's save it as a CSV format. So this file we have saved as CSV. So this Excel sheet is going to be used when the data is going to be updated from the automation. We can see from the automated data scrapping that we have seen. And now here we can click on what write to now. Here we have defined the path of the file that we are going to scrap here. So we can define the location under double quotes, or we can choose the file from the given tab as well. So from the desktop, we can choose web scrapping.csv. So whatever data is being scrapped by the module that we have defined, that is going to be saved in this web scrapping.csv file. And then once we are done with the entire setup, now we can debug or we can run it. We can simply run the entire program set. So if you want to run this, then this is going to execute each and every process that we have structured. And the entire process is going to be executed one by one. So it may take a couple of seconds in order for this entire process to be validated. As you can see, this entire process is being executed. Now, as you can see, it says it is currently being used by another program. Why we have got this error? Because we have opened the file here. So again, as it is, as long as it remains open, UiPath won't be able to write anything, correct? So we can close it, and again we can debug it. Now the file is closed. Now it is going to have the permission to write data on top of the file once the entire data scrapping is done. Because apart from the execution, we also have to be well aware of the common issues that we may be facing when the entire execution is done. Now the entire process has been completed. So now if we open the same CSV file, can you see this? The entire piece of data has automatically been scrapped and stored here by using RPA for the entire 101 products. And that too, not just for a single page. If you all can see here, this has been saved for each and every item stored across multiple pages as well. Thank you so much for joining, guys, and have a great day ahead. Take care. Bye-bye.